Why is it that something as ordinary as pork can hold such extraordinary spiritual weight? Muslims and Jews strictly avoid it, while Christians embrace it as part of their celebrations. At first glance, it might seem like a simple cultural difference, but beneath the surface lies a profound mystery. Could this divide be about more than just food? What if it reveals the deepest truths about obedience, purity, and how each faith understands its relationship with God? Then here's the real twist. These aren't just ancient rules for ancient people. These dietary practices still shape the way billions of people see the world, their faith, and even their identity. Have you ever wondered why Muslims and Jews treat pork as unclean, while Christians feel no hesitation in enjoying it? Is it just a matter of health, or does it unveil something revolutionary about the evolution of faith itself? This isn't a question about food, it's a question about the soul. And here's the exciting part. Understanding this divide could transform the way we see not just religion, but the choices we make every day. So, let's dig into this age-old riddle and uncover the truths behind why Muslims and Jews avoid pork, but Christians don't. What you discover might surprise you and change the way you think about faith, culture, and even your next meal. In ancient times, the rejection of pork wasn't just about religion. It was a survival strategy. Imagine living in a sweltering climate where refrigeration didn't exist. Pork, highly perishable and prone to diseases like trichinosis, posed significant risks. Communities that avoided it often thrived while others suffered. For Jews and Muslims, these prohibitions became woven into the fabric of their faith, reflecting practical wisdom. Think about it. When a rule saves lives, it naturally gains spiritual weight over generations. This wasn't merely about health, it was deeply symbolic. In Jewish law, pigs represented impurity, not just physically but spiritually. They were seen as creatures that wallowed in filth, a stark contrast to the holiness demanded of God's chosen people. Muslims echo this sentiment, viewing pork as something that taints the soul and disrupts the purity Allah desires. Isn't it fascinating how what we eat can be tied to how we perceive our place in the divine order? To truly grasp the significance, imagine someone today following a plant-based diet, not just for health, but as a statement of ethics. The ancient prohibitions worked similarly, creating a sense of identity and shared purpose. For Jews, refraining from pork reinforced their covenant with God, a reminder of their distinct role among nations. Similarly, for Muslims, these dietary laws served as a daily act of submission to Allah's will, cultivating discipline and faithfulness. You might wonder how these ancient practices survive in modern times. The answer lies in their power to unite communities. Think of shared meals, traditions, and festivals where these laws are observed. They create a sense of belonging, a thread that connects the past with the present. Even today, adhering to these rules isn't just about religion, it's about heritage, culture, and a profound connection to something greater. Yet, as profound as this ancient wisdom is, it begs a question. If these rules were so vital for survival and faith, why would another group, Christians, choose to abandon them entirely? How did a practice that symbolized purity and obedience transform into a symbol of freedom? Let's explore that next. When it comes to the Bible, pork isn't just another food, it's a symbol of distinction. In Leviticus and Deuteronomy, God explicitly declares pork unclean, and this wasn't a casual suggestion. For the Israelites, following these laws was an act of obedience, a way of showing their dedication to God's will. Imagine being part of a community where every meal became a reminder of your covenant with the divine. Doesn't it make you wonder how such rules shaped their identity? The Bible's prohibition wasn't limited to health concerns, although those were significant. It also had a spiritual dimension. Avoiding pork was a way for the Israelites to stand apart from neighboring cultures, many of whom indulged in practices considered unholy. By refusing to eat what others did, they signaled their unique relationship with God. Picture a family today choosing to live off-grid, avoiding modern conveniences to preserve their values. That's the level of commitment these laws demanded. Interestingly, these dietary rules weren't just about the food itself, but what it represented. Pork was seen as a test of obedience, a tangible way for people to prove their faith. It's like being given a simple task by a mentor to demonstrate trust and discipline. The Israelites' refusal to eat pork wasn't just about avoiding physical impurity, but about aligning themselves with God's standards. Isn't it fascinating how such small actions can carry profound meaning? For many Jews today, these laws continue to serve as a spiritual practice. Take kosher dietary rules, for instance. They're not just about restrictions, but about mindfulness in daily life. Imagine approaching every meal with intention, thinking about its spiritual significance. It's a powerful way to connect with God, turning something as mundane as eating into an act of worship. Couldn't we all use a little more mindfulness in our routines? But here's the twist. If pork was so clearly marked as unclean in the Bible, how do Christians justify eating it? What happened to the spiritual symbolism and the call to obedience? The answer lies in a radical shift in how purity and faith were understood, one that would challenge centuries of tradition. Let's uncover that next. Christianity introduced a groundbreaking shift when it came to dietary laws, including the prohibition of pork. The teachings of Jesus often emphasized inner purity over external rituals, challenging deeply ingrained traditions. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus declared that what enters the body doesn't defile a person, but rather what comes from the heart. Imagine being in that crowd, hearing such a radical statement. It must have felt like the ground beneath centuries-old practices was shaking. Could it be that the essence of faith isn't about rules, but the condition of the soul? The vision of the Apostle Peter in Acts 10 further cemented this change. In his vision, Peter saw a sheet filled with animals, including those considered unclean, and was told, "Kill and eat." His initial refusal mirrored generations of strict observance, but the divine voice insisted, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This wasn't just about food, it was a metaphor for inclusion, signaling that the message of salvation was for all people, Jews and Gentiles alike. It's incredible, isn't it, how a single vision could redefine spiritual boundaries. For early Christians, this shift wasn't just theological, but practical. Breaking away from dietary restrictions allowed them to engage more freely with non-Jewish communities, spreading their message without cultural barriers. Imagine trying to build a bridge with someone who insists on different rules for something as basic as food. By focusing on the purity of the heart, Christianity opened doors for greater unity. Doesn't this make you wonder how much of our own faith practices are about connection versus exclusion? Even today, this freedom resonates with many Christians. It's not uncommon to see pork served at holiday feasts or shared among believers without a second thought. Yet, for others, the act of eating freely serves as a reminder of grace, that salvation is a gift, not earned through rules. Think of it as choosing joy over obligation, a tangible way to celebrate the faith's central tenets. But how often do we pause to reflect on the deep theological history behind such freedoms? Still, this shift raises intriguing questions. If Christians embrace such dietary freedom, how does this contrast with the unwavering stance of Islam? What does it reveal about the different ways faiths interpret divine commands? Let's delve into the Islamic perspective and see what we uncover. In Islam, the prohibition of pork isn't just a dietary rule, it's an act of devotion. The Quran clearly states in Surah Al-Baqarah that pork is forbidden, and this isn't up for debate among Muslims. The reasoning goes beyond the physical. It's about spiritual discipline and obedience to Allah's will. Imagine a parent telling their child not to touch a hot stove, not because the stove is inherently evil, but because the act of listening builds trust and protection. Isn't that a powerful metaphor for faith? For Muslims, avoiding pork is a daily affirmation of their relationship with Allah. It's a constant reminder that faith isn't just about prayer or rituals, but about choices made in everyday life. Think about how someone might avoid fast food today as a commitment to health. In the same way, abstaining from pork reflects an inner commitment to purity and mindfulness. It's fascinating how such small actions can define a person's entire worldview, isn't it? Practically speaking, the prohibition reinforces a sense of identity within the Muslim community. It's more than a rule. It's a shared practice that binds believers across cultures and generations. Picture a family preparing a meal, carefully ensuring it aligns with halal guidelines. This act not only connects them to their faith, but also to a global Muslim community that upholds the same values. Can you see how food becomes a bridge to something much bigger? Moreover, Islam's dietary laws serve a protective purpose. Historically, they safeguarded communities from diseases linked to pork, much like the ancient Jewish prohibitions. Today, many Muslims view these laws as a blend of spiritual and practical wisdom, a testament to Allah's care for humanity. It's like following a doctor's advice, but trusting that the guidance comes from a higher power. Doesn't it make you wonder how often faith and practicality intersect? But here's where the conversation gets really interesting. While Muslims maintain this prohibition as a core expression of faith, Christians see no need for it. How did such diverging paths emerge from traditions that share so much history? And how do Jews find their place in this conversation, balancing ancient laws with modern life? Let's explore the cultural and spiritual impact next. For Muslims and Jews, dietary laws surrounding pork aren't just restrictions, they're expressions of identity and faith. These rules act as a spiritual anchor, connecting believers to their history and community. Imagine a family gathering for a traditional meal, each bite symbolizing centuries of devotion. For Jews, keeping kosher becomes a tangible reminder of their covenant with God, while for Muslims, halal observance reflects submission to Allah. Isn't it amazing how food can carry such deep spiritual meaning? In contrast, Christianity's dietary freedom reflects a profound theological shift. By abandoning restrictions like the prohibition of pork, Christians embraced a broader, more inclusive view of faith. Picture a potluck dinner where everyone shares a meal without worrying about rules. This freedom allows for connection across cultures, symbolizing the universal nature of salvation. But doesn't it make you wonder how this change impacted Christian identity compared to the strict observances of Judaism and Islam? These dietary laws also influence cultural dynamics. For Jews and Muslims, avoiding pork fosters unity within their communities and sets them apart in multicultural societies. Imagine explaining to a co-worker why you can't eat a dish at a party. It's not just about the food, but about sharing your faith and values. This distinction often sparks curiosity, opening the door to meaningful conversations about spirituality. Isn't that a subtle yet powerful form of witnessing? On a practical level, the spiritual impact of these laws extends beyond the plate. For Jews, kosher living demands constant mindfulness, turning mundane tasks into acts of worship. Similarly, Muslims find spiritual discipline in checking ingredients and ensuring food aligns with halal standards. Think of it as training for the soul, a daily practice of intentionality that strengthens one's connection to God. Couldn't we all benefit from bringing more intention into our daily habits? Yet, these differences beg a deeper question. If dietary laws shape identity so profoundly, what happens when they're no longer observed? How does faith evolve without these tangible symbols? And what does it say about the adaptability of religion in a modern world? the conversation doesn't end here. It's only the beginning of uncovering the layers of meaning behind these practices. So, what does this all mean for you? Think about how something as simple as food can shape identities, strengthen faith, and define cultures. Have you ever considered the power behind your daily choices and what they say about your values? Muslims and Jews find discipline and connection in avoiding pork, while Christians embrace the freedom of grace. But what about you? How do your beliefs influence your habits? And what do they reveal about your spiritual journey? Here's a challenge. Reflect on how these ancient practices still resonate today. What traditions in your life bring you closer to God? Are they serving their purpose, or is it time to reevaluate? Imagine approaching your own faith with the same level of intention and devotion as those who follow these dietary laws. What changes could you make to strengthen your connection with the divine? Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think dietary practices should still play a role in modern faith? Have you ever wondered why different religions interpret the same scriptures so differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know how this resonates with you. And if this exploration has sparked your curiosity, don't stop here. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any upcoming videos as we dive deeper into fascinating topics like this. There's so much more to uncover, and I can't wait to share it with you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep growing.